It's Dunkirk, France. It's May 26th, 1940. 500,000 Allied soldiers are trapped like sardines on a beach. The Nazis are closing in. British destroyers are being bombed from the sky. And Winston Churchill is somewhere in London chain-smoking and yelling at maps. This is the famous Dunkirk evacuation, where civilians in fishing boats saved the British Army. But hold up. What if, instead of running away, a full tank battalion stayed behind to fight? Like, actual tanks. Dozens of them, not one rusty tin can from World War I. We're talking a proper armoured standoff. Could they hold the line? Could they delay the Germans long enough for everyone to escape? Let's find out, because we're about to rewrite one of the most desperate retreats in military history. Now, about those tanks. Let's say the Allies brought in a full battalion of Matilda II infantry tanks. Why? Because in 1940, the Matilda was basically a rolling fortress. Top speed? A blazing 15 miles per hour. So, not winning any races. Armor? Up to 78 millimeters thick. German bullets just bounced off like popcorn. Main gun? A 40mm QF 2-pounder cannon. Not huge, but decent enough to punch a panzer in the face. Special feature? It could shrug off pretty much anything short of a direct hit from an artillery shell. So imagine 30 to 40 of these bad boys dug in outside Dunkirk, waiting for the Nazi blitzkrieg with their engines growling and zero intention of moving. But here's the catch. The Germans weren't exactly polite guests. On May 26th, the German army was about to flatten the Dunkirk perimeter. Panzer divisions, Luftwaffe airstrikes, artillery barrages, the full buffet of destruction. Historically, Hitler ordered a temporary halt, giving the Allies time to evacuate. But, in our alternate timeline, let's pretend he doesn't. Let's pretend he goes full, I want that beach by Friday mode. So now, you've got tens of thousands of desperate Allied troops. And guarding them? A tank battalion sitting in ruined French towns with a single job. Don't let anything through. And for the first few days, it works. The German Panzer III and IV tanks roll in expecting to steamroll some lightly armed stragglers. Instead, they get hit with high explosive tank shells from behind stone walls. Matilda II's absorb German fire like it's a minor inconvenience. British and French tank crews are coordinating like they've done this 100 times, except they absolutely haven't. In this version of history, the tanks buy time. Every minute they delay the advance is another minute for soldiers to board ships, for civilians to escape, and for German logistics to get tangled like headphone cables. But then comes the Luftwaffe. On June 1st, the Germans throw everything into the air. Stuka's dive bomb positions. Ju-87s carpet the field. Tanks are armoured, sure, but they're not invincible. The Matilda IIs can't shoot back at planes. Their anti-air support, almost non-existent. So tanks start popping like steel piñatas. If you thought a beach was a terrible place to get stuck before, try doing it while pieces of tank turret rain down like confetti. But that wasn't even the worst part. Because soon, the Germans bring out the big guns. Literally. The 88mm flak gun. Originally designed to shoot down aircraft, the Germans realized this thing was perfect for turning tanks into modern art. Suddenly, the Matilda's thick armor isn't so impressive. From miles away, German gunners start taking out British tanks with surgical precision. Boom. One Matilda down. Boom. Another burns. The battalion starts thinning out. Fast. But the delay? It works. By June 3rd, the beach is almost empty. 338,000 Allied troops have been evacuated. That's right, 338,000. Mostly because those tanks refuse to give up the line. The last few Matildas are wrecked, crews either dead or captured, but their stand becomes legendary, like an armoured version of Thermopylae. The Germans take Dunkirk, but too late. The British Army survives to fight another day. And now, things start to shift. Because with that many soldiers saved, and with Nazi forces bogged down longer than expected, the entire timeline starts wobbling like jelly on a tank engine. Let's talk about what comes next, because the war's about to change in ways no one saw coming. It's June 4th, 1940. Hitler finally walks into Dunkirk like it's some kind of grand prize, only to find a beach full of empty crates, broken helmets, and a few smouldering tank husks. No prisoners. No victory parade. Just sand and humiliation. The British Expeditionary Force, gone. Sailed off to England. 338,000 strong. But here's the kicker. Because the tank battalion held the line so long, way more men escaped than in the original timeline. And now the British Army isn't limping home. It's stomping back, furious, and fully manned. It's like evacuating an entire stadium full of angry, armed rugby players. And they all want payback. Meanwhile, Hitler's generals are fuming. They lost dozens of tanks, burned through fuel they didn't have, and wasted time they couldn't afford. The Blitzkrieg got jammed like a cheap toaster. And guess who's quietly taking notes? The Soviets sipping borscht and thinking, maybe the Germans aren't invincible after all. Now let's talk impact. Back in London, Winston Churchill isn't just puffing cigars and quoting Shakespeare. He's fired up. The kind of fired up that makes you punch a typewriter. He gives speeches that make housewives want to join the army. Factories go into overdrive. British tank production ramps up faster than anyone expected. Propaganda posters basically glue themselves to brick walls. Morale through the roof. Why? Because now the British people have a story of tanks that stayed behind and said, nope, you're not coming through. Instead of just running, the narrative becomes one of grit, sacrifice, heroism. Schools start teaching about the Dunkirk hold. Churches light candles for the Matilda crews. Little British kids pretend to be tanks in the schoolyard. I'm number 7. I held the North Road. It becomes that big. And this ripples across Europe. The French, who've been stuck in a, well, this is fine mindset, suddenly snap out of it. Because now the Germans are delayed. Their panzers are stuck digging Matilda shrapnel out of their tracks. The Blitzkrieg momentum? Gone. With extra weeks to breathe, the French resistance stops being just a few angry farmers and becomes a serious problem. Sabotage operations start earlier. Rail lines get blown up. German supply convoys start vanishing. Someone even poisons a Panzer Division's coffee. Okay, maybe not that, but you get the idea. And this delay? It doesn't just help the French, it helps the world. Because now the timeline changes. Back in Washington, D.C., Franklin Roosevelt is watching everything like it's a radio drama with explosions. The American public, still hesitant to jump into another world war, suddenly sees Britain holding the line and thinks, maybe these guys have a shot. Lend-lease shipments ramp up earlier. Guns, trucks, food, aircraft. America becomes the world's Amazon warehouse, minus the free returns. With more equipment arriving earlier, British and Commonwealth forces are suddenly way more dangerous. And Churchill? He starts whispering to Roosevelt about a real offensive. Not some far-off dream for 1944, but something bolder. What if D-Day came in 1942? It's not as crazy as it sounds. With an intact British army, earlier American support, and a German military still licking its wounds from the Dunkirk mess, the conditions are very different. The Germans aren't spread as thin across Europe yet. Their defences in France? Still under construction. The Atlantic Wall is more of an Atlantic speed bump. Hitler's high command is arguing about everything from tank designs to sandwich rations. So maybe, just maybe, the Allies launch their invasion early. Maybe they hit Normandy 2 years ahead of schedule. And Hitler? He absolutely freaks out. His mustache probably jumps ship. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin is watching with mild interest and heavy paranoia. In the original timeline, he had to hold off the Nazi invasion with frozen rifles and sheer willpower. But now? Now he's not alone. With the Western Allies more confident, they start shipping aid earlier. Not just crates of spam and warm socks, but real weapons. Tanks, planes, fuel. Soviet engineers take one look at the Matilda II and say, yes, but bigger. Soon you've got hybrid tank designs that can shrug off artillery and flatten buildings for fun. The Battle of Moscow? Held? The Siege of Leningrad? Broken earlier. And Stalingrad? Maybe it's not a meat grinder this time. Maybe it's just a mild inconvenience. A speed bump on the road to Berlin. Back in Britain, the tank crews become legends. Every surviving member of the Dunkirk battalion is treated like a rock star. Parades are held. Streets are renamed. Matilda-themed pubs start popping up. The Tank and Tread becomes the most popular bar in Manchester. And for the crews who didn't make it, they're honoured like Spartan warriors. Statues go up. Plaques are nailed onto church walls. School kids recite their names in morning assemblies. The phrase "hold the line like Dunkirk" becomes a thing. It's used in every military unit, office argument, and pub brawl for the next 50 years. Even in Parliament, when someone screws up, well, that was no Dunkirk, was it? And Germany, they feel it. The aura of unstoppable blitzkrieg starts to crack. Officers begin to question plans. Hitler yells louder. Trust in the high command erodes. The 88mm guns that took out the Matildas? Overused, overheating, and under replacement. German tank production slows down just as Allied production ramps up. The balance shifts. And the war? The war gets meaner, but shorter. More chaos early on, but less bloodshed overall. Maybe the war ends in 1944 instead of 45. Maybe Berlin falls a full year earlier. Maybe fewer cities get leveled. Fewer lives lost. So let's summarize. Matilda tanks didn't just fight. They bought time. Dunkirk wasn't a retreat. It became a legend. Britain, empowered. France, resilient. America, engaged early. The Soviets, reinforced. Germany, delayed, drained, and eventually defeated. All because a battalion of slow, chonky tanks stood their ground and said, no. And now the real question. If you could send one modern weapon back in time to Dunkirk, would you pick a railgun, a stealth bomber, or just a really good air fryer? Subscribe, please.